We are all burned out and it's driving us effing crazy. In Monday's video, we discussed how capitalism is more than just an economic system. It is also a way of thinking and a way of making humans. That is, inhumans. And it does this by being a system of desire that produces desire, but without giving the ultimate payoff of satisfaction. Then what we discussed is how this turns us into certain types of humans living under capitalism, what we might call capitalist zombies. That is, all of our thoughts and feelings and actions are all constituted according to this logic of desire producing desire, which then causes desire to desire more desire. And in today's vid, we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at this process, but under the banner of what has been termed by social scientists and other theorists as burnout. So it's been said by some that the primary difference between a philosopher and a sophist is that the latter believes that happiness is the primary goal of life. We see this in pop psychology, the science of happiness, the emergence of chief happiness officers within the corporate world. It's even become an economic metric, the gross national happiness metric. And it's seeped into everyday social media culture in the forms of inspirational quotes and the proliferation of life coaches and the like. It seems that there is a constant pressure to be happy. But what happens when the pressure to be happy is the ironic source of unhappiness?
I swear I've tried everything. Cut the coffee for some tea. Cutting friends off for me. Then I tried to get more sleep. But the roots are playing so deep. Do you think that you could love me if I can't get happy?
This is what philosopher Byung-Chul Han explores across all of his work. But he recently published an article on the fallout of the coronavirus that I think really brings his more theoretical musings quite close to home for us. The article is called The Tiredness Virus, and as you can see from the tagline, Han believes that COVID has really intensified our burnout. As he states, COVID acts as a mirror, a way of reflecting back to us the already present pathological tendencies of life lived under late neoliberal capitalism. So what are these pathologies? Well, number one is tiredness, or burnout. This is perhaps the symptomatic effect for Han of life lived under neoliberal capitalism. It's not merely that work is tiring, because once work is done, you get to rest. But neoliberalism doesn't allow for rest, because even our leisure time is subsumed under the pressures. Side note, there's a great book on this called 24/7 by Jonathan Crary. It's short, it's really accessible. The link is down below for you, so definitely check that one out too. But basically, both thinkers believe that the pressure to produce never ceases. It never abates. It's constant, even when we're sleeping. Maybe. Again, check out Crary's book. There's some good nuggets in there. Now this relates back to our video on Monday about how capitalism produces us as humans who desire desire, and how that desire produces the need for more desire, and how it's this endless pathological tendency.
Truly, you have a dizzying intellect. Wait till I get going!
Now for Han, this tiredness is pathological precisely because it never abates. There's no break, there's no end. It's an excess, if you will, of desiring for the purpose of desiring, ultimately without any possibility of exhaustion. What this means is that there's no breaking point, whereas with exhaustion you actually do get a breaking point. There's a point of fatigue. But under capitalism, under late neoliberal capitalism, this point of exhaustion is taken away from us. Because we think we're free to rest, but even our leisure time is working for this system of desire producing desire, which means we're always giving and giving and giving. As he states, the insidious logic of achievement permanently forces us to get ahead of ourselves. Once we've achieved something, we want to achieve more. That is, we want to get ahead of ourselves yet again. But of course, it's impossible to get ahead of oneself. This absurd logic ultimately leads to a breakdown. The achievement subject believes that it is free, but it is actually a slave. It's an absolute slave insofar as it voluntarily exploits itself, even without a master being present. The pandemic has also shown the downside to digitalization for Han. The constant Zoom meetings about mental health, even Zoom meetings about how we're having too many Zoom meetings. The increase of time on social media apps, the increase in e-commerce shopping. This all leads to what Han calls an alienating and disembodying effect. That is, we are essentially cut off from the body of the other, the physicalness, the proximity of the other. And we just face the void of the digital abyss, producing for it, giving to it, hoping that it will give something back to us. Koreans have referred to the fallout from this as the Corona Blues. Journalist Sarah Jaffe reports that the term burnout has been around since the 1970s. It's always been a type of stress associated with work. She cites psychoanalyst Josh Cohen, who writes that burnout is a state where you've exhausted all your internal resources, yet cannot free yourself of the nervous compulsion to go on regardless. Another psychoanalyst calls it a kind of depression that occurs in reaction to terrible working conditions. As the title of Jaffe's most recent book suggests, work won't love you back, even when doing something we love, which is something I often say. It is this labor of love, this system of love laboring, that actually exacerbates burnout. Because no matter what job we do, no matter how we spend our free time, we're giving more than we get back. And really, it might be even worse for those who claim to be doing something they love, because we, in a weird, perverse way, enjoy our exploitation. So we race even harder and harder towards an endlessly receding goalpost. According to a 2018 study, the rate of overall burnout among the workforce in the United States was right about 30%. Further, a Gallup poll reported that 23% of the workforce reported feeling burnout either often or always. Even the World Health Organization has recently called burnout an occupational phenomenon that deserves serious attention and serious and immediate solutions. So, how can we find rest? Well, Jaffe suggests joining social unions, art collectives, even labor unions. In Han's terms, we might say that this means coming into proximity with the body of the other. Now, Han is a bit of a romantic, so usually his suggestions have something to do with unplugging or with sort of like refusing the logics of the system entirely through types of escape, or even confronting negativity in some sort of romantic or highly theoretical sense. But I still think that there's something that we can learn from both him and Jaffe here. Because I think what they're both essentially saying is, one, the system won't love you back. Two, it's an insidious system that changes our very emotional states and how they flow. And three, there are cures, but it requires us breaking those emotional flows, those affective flows, those very foundational flows that we believe that are already part of what it means to be human, to desire something. And this might even include contesting the totality of the happiness industry and the pressures it exerts on us. So what do you think? Is happiness a good goal? Is it a shallow goal? One that only serves the interests of capital and its expansion? Is there a third option, a middle path? One that still thinks that happiness is valuable, but that also figures ways to achieve it without being subsumed under an exploitative logic? And what do you think are ways that we can stop and heal this occupational phenomenon of burnout? Comment below and let's have a chat about this. Of course, I'm also going to provide a bunch of resources so you can read up on burnout and read up on Jaffe and her book and Byung-Chul Han's book, as well as many other scholars who have written about this, as well as reports from the WHO and other sort of clinical studies that have been done. So you can do that in your own time and continue to learn and grow. And hopefully you can come up with better solutions than what I'm able to offer here in this video. And of course, share the shit out of this video. You know, let's get a bunch of people involved here so that we can create a rich community of voices that can help us think through this, so we're not thinking through it alone, in our isolation, as we're trying to figure out how to mitigate the fallout from burnout. Alrighty, y'all. Love ya.